Hey everyone and welcome back. I wanted to do a quick video that I thought might be kind of fun. A friend of mine tagged me in a post on Facebook about posting your 10 favorite soundtrack albums. Now granted, they tagged me this several days ago. That's how often I'm on Facebook, which is not often these days. And I started compiling a list of some of my favorite soundtracks, and very quickly that list got super long. But the more I thought about it, the more I was just like, you know, that would be a fun thing to do for a video. And I decided to try and kind of get the list down to as small as possible. So I decided to actually make this more into my favorite horror soundtracks, and that list was still very long. So I decided to go ahead and put on some other criteria that would help just get the list down to 10, because I did want to keep it at 10. So the criteria that I put on myself is that it definitely had to be a favorite soundtrack, first and foremost. It has to be something that I listen to regularly. So not something that I listen, that might be a favorite, but I just don't listen to it that often. And it has to be one that has also inspired me creatively. So I have actually a lot of soundtracks that I listen to. For example, if I'm working on a screenplay, I like to find music that I feel sort of fits the scene that I'm writing. And then there are other pieces of music that I just like to have on while I'm writing in general. And it had to be an album that I also listen to from start to finish. Now, you know, I have several albums that I'll put on and I'll listen to maybe like one or two tracks and then jump to something else. Like, I wanted to also pick one that I literally listened to from beginning to end. So once I started putting this criteria down, then it did start getting the list smaller and smaller. And I was still kind of long, so I definitely went through it a couple times. But I think I finally got it down to 10. Now, I wish I could say these are going to be surprising, but chances are if you've watched this channel long enough, you're probably going to be able to pretty much figure them out almost immediately. But again, these are personal picks, so I guess that does sort of make it pretty obvious on my end. So these are going to be in alphabetical order, which the exception of one, which I decided to just do last, because it's probably the one, believe it or not, that I actually do listen to the most. So first up is the soundtrack to Christine by John Carpenter. There's actually one that I feel is one of John Carpenter's most underrated scores, and actually kind of almost most underrated films. Specifically, the theme that he uses for Arnie, the main character. There's something very sad and kind of lonely about the theme, and I kind of felt it was definitely a piece of music that sort of went outside what John Carpenter had done previously, in the fact that it was very character specific. And then obviously the other horror elements of the score, you know, are definitely sort of classic John Carpenter. Next one will come as no surprise, and that is obviously Dawn of the Dead. Both the Goblin music and as well as the library music. Now, there was an older library compilation released many years ago that I've been listening to a lot, until obviously I got the new box set that had almost the entire library music from the film on it, as well as the Goblin music. So I'm sort of using that as a whole, but again, I listen to all of that literally a lot, like all the time. And again, Dawn of the Dead is one of my top 3 favorite films, so obviously no surprise there. Next one is Day of the Dead by John Harrison. This is actually one that I have grown up listening to and was actually a big influence on one of the screenplays I wrote, which is kind of funny because the screenplay I wrote that I was listening to some of the music for was actually not a horror film. It was actually an action film. So it's kind of interesting the way creativity can work sometimes. As I mentioned before, this next one will come as no surprise because I always seem to somehow squeeze it onto every list I make. And that is indeed Fright Night, both the score by Brad Fiedel as well as the songs. It's another one I absolutely love. I listen to both the score and the songs a lot. And I talk about Fright Night enough, so I'll just move on. Next one is probably going to be obvious because I think I mentioned before that I think it's actually one of the best horror soundtracks ever made for a multitude of reasons, and that is Halloween by John Carpenter. I think that score is literally amazing, and I listen to it all year round. I'm not even kidding. Next one is also one that will come as no surprise, and that is obviously Halloween 3, Season of the Witch by Alan Howarth and John Carpenter. I mention all the time I love Halloween 3, so obviously the score is going to be no different, and that is in fact one I do listen to a lot, and yes, I do listen to it all the way through, and I just absolutely love it. Next one could be one you could be like, is that horror? For me, it's a horror film, but I can understand why some other people may not think it is. And that is from Michael Mann's Manhunter. Manhunter is a film I absolutely love so much. And there actually have been certain aspects of that film that have indeed worked their way into film projects of mine. And that soundtrack is one that, even though aspects of it are probably dated, but I love 80s music, so it's okay for me. But I love the soundtrack to that, and I listen to it a lot. And certain pieces pieces of that music I have definitely listened to while writing a lot of different scripts. And you can decide whether or not Manhunter qualifies as a horror film or not. It is for me, so I wanted to include it. Next one is another John Carpenter one. Gee, what a shock. And that is Prince of Darkness. I love the score for Prince of Darkness. I've always loved the score to Prince of Darkness because I really think it is, in some ways, John Carpenter's most what's the right word? Almost atmospheric score. Like that one, I think that and The Fog, I think, are the two most atmospheric scores that John Carpenter's ever written. And The Fog came pretty close, actually, to making this list. But Prince of Darkness is one that I have specifically listened to while working on screenplays. Specifically, it was a short film I remember I was working on. The majority of the music I listened to for that one was actually Prince of Darkness. Next up is The Return of the Living Dead, one of my favorite soundtracks. Another one that is obviously gets so much play for me. I absolutely love it. I listen to it like all the time. And aspects of it have definitely inspired me creatively. Plus those songs are just amazing. And then finally, probably the one I listen to the most, believe it or not, is Creepshow by John Harrison. Now again, some of you may be like, well, I'm not shocked by that at all. But it is indeed one that I absolutely love. Again, probably because I discovered Creepshow when I was really, really young, so I think it had such an impact on me. So the music from the film is sort of burned in my brain. But that is one that even recently, like just like a week ago, I was photographing some of my camera gear that I'm planning to sell, and I had the Creepshow album just playing in the background for me. In fact, as I was coming up with this list, I was listening to the Creepshow soundtrack, so there you go. So those are my 10 favorite horror soundtracks. Again, I could easily name like 100 more, but with the criteria that I sort of added on myself, those 10 definitely fit the bill. Now, you don't need to put the same criteria on yours, but definitely let me know some of your favorite horror soundtracks. Always love doing these kind of lists. And as always, thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next one.